As free agency begins to unwind a little bit, I'm here just to give my honest thoughts, opinions, and reactions to any of the trades and signings that happened so far in these past almost 48 hours. And yeah, I just want to see where these teams are heading, the futures of these teams, anything of that nature. My name's Cairo. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. And honestly, I just wanted to get started with it took like 15 minutes for the first signing to happen or like anything relatively close, and the Grizzlies just came out firing. And I found it ironic because I think there's a tampering period with like the NBA. You don't want to sign somebody like immediately, but the Grizzlies started off firing. I'm just gonna go in order from what I remember, what I've seen. Hopefully, no guys get signed when I'm making this video. But to start off, just looking off my notes, yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. signs basically a 50 million a year contract, and it's a new max after the train with Bane. And they also give more money to Santi Aldama, and according to Bobby Marks, they clear about $10 million in salary. I think overall it is I think it's a good signing. I think it's Jaren Jackson Jr. Although he isn't the best at rebounding, you can't nitpick here and there. I think he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, if not top five in the NBA. He provides a lot of spacing and shooting, and he should be a corner piece for the Memphis Grizzlies. But we still have issues regarding, you trade Desmond Bane, who is a valuable piece, and you get a lot of picks back. For a while, I thought the Grizzlies were going to rebuild, trade Ja, maybe trade Jaren, but it looks like they're going into a different way. They are gonna clear. They've cleared up some money, so clearly they don't want to be over the second apron. And overall, I think this was a good signing. I think Santi Aldama. I've looked a lot with like the Grizzlies Reddit and like different things regarding the Grizzlies, and it's different notions with like how people feel about Santi Aldama. Like he's a good player. He's kind of like a stretch five, I guess. He's 7 foot. He gets after it. So he's not the best player, but they get him for his money. Maybe he should have got paid a little bit less. But the Grizzlies come off firing. They save $10 million in the books. I can't be mad at this, right? And then another big piece that goes away from the Lakers is Dorian Finney-Smith. Um, I'm not the highest on Dorian Finney-Smith. He's more of a guy where you have to watch the game and not see the box scores and the stats to really understand his value. He's a very good defender, and he can hit 3 point shots. He wasn't the best playing with the Lakers, but he provided good value, especially for what they traded for. And him going to the Rockets, I think there was a little bit of rumors with like him, like his camp, not his camp, but the Lakers camp and like media. They know he was going away, so they tried to devalue his free agency, and I think his camp got aware of that, and regardless, he still signed with the Rockets for I'd say a pretty good deal anyway. And I think the Rockets add more pieces. And just to get more on the Rockets, I could just go through teams. Especially I'm not gonna go through every single one. Like obviously, I'm not gonna go to like Jericho Sims signing with the Bucks. But like I think the Rockets are one of the biggest winners in these free agencies, and it hasn't even been a full 2 days yet. And they address certain needs on their team. They provide Kevin Durant with a lot of 3 and D wings, right? You get a veteran in Dorian Finney-Smith. You re-sign Jabari Smith, who was great in the playoffs. His stats don't tell the full story, but he was great in the playoffs for them. And then they get rid of Jalen Green, and then you lose a little bit of asset in Dillon Brooks, but you kind of get a little bit that back with Dorian Finney-Smith. You kept your young core. You still have Tari Eason. They might trade Cam Whitmore, but then again, you're still having pieces coming back. You have a great coach in Ime Udoka. The Clint Capella signing was a little bit confusing, I would say, in my opinion. I think although Steven Adams probably isn't, it's crazy because Steven Adams is like only like 30 years old, maybe 31. So he's still kind of relatively young, but he's not the best. And for a backup, he signed for a pretty good deal. So maybe I think it's more of a depth thing for the Houston Rockets. So maybe they sign Capella because it adds a little bit of more athleticism compared to Steven Adams. So if they run like a different type of set where they need um, Fred Van Vliet or somebody to make plays for Clint Capella to get more efficiency and creativity around the rim so they can attack the rim a little bit better. Maybe that's a little bit more suitable for a Clint Capella than a Steven Adams, right? So I think easily Rockets are one of the biggest winners in this offseason. And then D'Lo. D'Lo signs with the Mavericks. I think it's a cool deal. I mean, I don't know how long it's for. Maybe it's for, I think it was for a 1 year deal, maybe. But they feel the need for Kyrie, and I do think the Rockets, not the Rockets, the Mavericks are one of the deepest teams. All the Texas teams are deep, right? So the Rockets, not the Rockets, sorry. The Mavericks get a little bit more of a playmaking guard. Granted, he is pretty inconsistent, can't really play defense, but he's a very serviceable point guard for what they need, and it provides enough spacing for where, he can hit shots on the outside. He can play make. He's played with Anthony Davis. One of his highest assist leaders too is to Anthony Davis. So now you have also another threat in Cooper Flag. You still have Daniel Gafford. You just paid him, and then Derek Lively. I think the Mavericks could be a very dark horse team to be at least very good team, right? But nothing insane. I think it still definitely hurts to lose Kyrie out there, but I think you get a Phillip point guard, and that's great. I really thought they were gonna go for Drew Holiday. I thought it was the perfect team. I think he didn't play his best season last season, but he provided enough where defensively he was out there and he made some plays here and there. But D'Lo's not the worst. So yeah, I like that for them. And probably the biggest trade that we've seen so far would be the Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson, just straight up like that, shooter for shooter. It's interesting on both sides. I would say they save around $10 million. Michael Porter Jr. did not play the best with Jokic, and he tends not to pass the ball. He gets very tunnel vision. If you watch a lot of Michael Porter Jr.'s games, you know that he picks up the ball very early, like extremely early, which causes him to turn the ball over a lot. So that's a big issue. And then they get kind of the same player, a little bit more versatile in Cam Johnson, but they free up a lot of money. I say it's interesting more of when you look at it on the Nets perspective. Although like everybody say the Nuggets are winning, which I do think they are. The Nuggets are also one of the biggest winners in this free agency. They get a lot deeper. When you look at the Nets point of view, one, even though I didn't like any of their draft picks, like it made no sense to me. I like the upside with a lot of the picks that they have. They're kind of forming this OKC like type of conundrum where they're like getting as many picks as they want, and I feel as though they don't really care if they lose. They want to be competitive. They still have good players on their team, but unironically, you have Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr., both guys who don't like to pass the ball on the same team. That's going to be very interesting. So that it makes a little bit more sense now how you have basically three taller playmaking point guards in Jaeger Demon, Traore, and what's Danny? Sir, not Danny Wolf. Ben Seraph. I completely forgot his name. I'm sorry. But that makes a little bit more sense now, I guess. But I still didn't like their draft. But overall, getting that 2032 Nuggets pick unprotected, I think it's great value. I mean, you don't know what the Nuggets could be. I think Jokic is going to be almost 40 by then, and by then they could be on the rebuilding phase. So there could be a lot of changes, and then the Nets could be a really good team in the future. Granted, all those players probably wouldn't be there. Like, I don't expect anybody on the current Nets to be there. Like, even some of their draft picks, maybe Jaeger, Demon, or Norlane Trail would be there. Danny Wolf seems like a very good playmaking 7-footer. It's an interesting story because his type of move doesn't really last in the league. You see guys like Luka Garza not really get minutes in. He just signed with the Celtics though, so they can be serviceable. But I do think, both sides have things to rely on. Like the Nuggets, they got better than the Nets. They got that pick, and it's value for both teams, right? Another one that I was kind of confused about was the Ty Jerome. He's the backup point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm pretty sure he signed. Ty Jerome, yeah, I'm pretty sure he signed, and he signed for about 9 million. But Lonzo makes more. It's confusing as to what the Cavaliers are doing in terms of trading for Lonzo Ball. I didn't really like Isaac Okoro. I mean, great, he's a great perimeter defender, but you have to be able to play on both sides of the ball. So I understand the trade, and if Lonzo is healthy, he could be better than Ty Jerome, and he's not making that much more money than Ty Jerome, but I don't understand the value of like, although Ty Jerome played pretty poorly in the playoffs, he still has proven that he can stay healthy and he can be on the floor and he can be very serviceable. He averaged like 12 points off the bench on good efficiency. So it's interesting how they didn't want to rely on Ty Jerome, and they just drafted Tyrese Proctor as well, another bigger guard that can shoot and play make. So it's interesting where the Cavaliers are heading, but I do think this is a good deal for Ty Jerome. I think, for his value, I expected him to get a little bit more. So maybe, the Grizzlies kind of got a steal. So, I like that for the Grizzlies. Um, KPJ to the Bucks. I don't really understand what the Bucks are doing. I'll get into that later because that's more of an interesting situation. I'll get that more towards the end because we just heard that Lillard just got waived. But Schroeder to the Kings. Originally we saw on social media that like Schroeder wanted to be a Piston, and I think Schroeder provided a lot of great veteran presence in that locker room, and especially being a backup point guard. Him showing up. He's always going to be a great defensive like player. Like he provides a lot of, that upside of him being like a guy that can be more than just only defense, but he provides the value in like who he is in the locker room, and who he is as like a playmaking guard and how he gets after it and like he's in the passing lanes, you know what I mean? And it's hard to explain, but when you watch it, you kind of understand, right? Dennis Schroeder is good, but the Kings. I have no idea what the Kings are doing at this point. I'm surprised the Kings and the Bulls are pissing me off because at this point, why aren't they rebuilding? Like they have good assets, they have good players, but it's like back to the Bulls. They traded Isaac Okoro for Isaac Okoro, and I think the Cavaliers offered a first, and they didn't take it. And I'm like, it makes no sense to me. I think the Bulls have some good pieces here and there, but you're not gonna always hit on a guy between 10 to 15. Like if you want a top 5 draft pick, you need to go after it. And granted, they didn't hit on Patrick Williams, but that's like a one-time thing. You need to keep having those occurrences because every now and then you're gonna hit, right? But yeah, those two teams have been pissing me off. I just had to get that off my chest. Yeah, just to go a little bit more into the Nuggets. I'm scrambling a little bit, but the Nuggets do get deeper. I like what they're adding. Michael Porter Jr. They get back Bruce Brown. One of their biggest issues is that the depth wasn't there. You had injuries to Aaron Gordon, and then Peyton Watson. Although he's a very good defender, there's inconsistencies a lot of the time on the offensive side of the ball. Christian Braun has shown that he can play in that KCP role, and when you had Christian Braun coming off the bench, and the year they lost it in 2024, that was one of the biggest issues because Mike Malone didn't trust them out there, right? But clearly he's played really well. But obviously you need that depth. So getting Cam Johnson and then Bruce Brown to come off the bench on a 1-year deal is an absolute steal, right? Bruce Brown can provide a lot of value. Like he's played center for the Brooklyn Nets, right? He can play 1 through 5. He's effective shooting the ball. He didn't play his best, obviously, in recent years. But when you're playing with Jokic, you kind of can assume that you're gonna be a lot better, right? So I think the Nuggets can be dangerous. The Nuggets and the Rockets do rival OKC, right? There were some other little things. I'm very confused about what New Orleans is doing. Looney goes to New Orleans, and they have like 4 centers. I'm pretty sure they have, what is it? You could argue Queen, sometimes Zion. I wouldn't count Zion, but you could argue Queen, Misi, and then Looney. I feel like I'm forgetting one more player. I'm definitely forgetting somebody. But they have those players there, and I just really don't like the fit with like one Jordan Poole being there, and he's a good player for sure, but his type of archetype doesn't really mesh well with Zion or Derek Queens in terms of like winning basketball. Now, granted, you're gonna see a lot of highlights. Like you're gonna see a lot of highlights between Jordan Poole's doing step back threes, side steps, and then throwing the lob up to Zion or Queen, right? But Queen is very similar to an Alpert Sengun. I'm high on Queen, but he needs to be in a certain system for me to see him doing well, right? And I don't think that's going to be with Zion. Like the spacing is not going to be there. Unless Queen learns how to be a stretch 5, it could work tremendously, but I realistically don't see it. And them giving up a first round pick that has a chance to be, I think, in the top 5 is very dangerous. I'm pretty sure it's next year's draft pick too. And it's just a risk because if there's a good chance, because Sham said it, there's a good chance that Queen becomes a very good player. But if he doesn't, you just wasted a draft pick on a potential top 5 draft pick in the year following. It's a risky move. I do think getting Kevon Looney definitely provides a lot of value. Him being a good rebounder and veteran presence. He's a championship, right? He's won 3 rings. I'm just surprised the Warriors didn't re-sign him back. Like maybe there's a little bit of drama going on there, but I'm kind of confused on what the Pelicans are really building. They don't seem like a team. They have a lot of good players on their team for sure, but I think fit will always matter in the NBA. Like I know it's a positionless game and there's positionless basketball, but fit will always matter, and I'm just confused on how it's gonna work. That's all. I want to see it work out, but we'll see where it goes. Um, Karis LeVert to Detroit. 2 year deal. It's nothing insane. I think they get another backup option. And Jaden Ivey gets injured, he could definitely start for sure. I want to see where Ron Holland goes for sure in terms of upside in his development. I think he could be a very good player. I'm high on him. But just Karis LeVert, microwave score. If he doesn't shoot well, then he's kind of. It's hard to put him out there on the floor because this was one of his better shooting years. But he tends to either get like 40 points one game or 3 points the next game. There's really no in between with Karis LeVert. He's a microwave scorer, but he can do things on the other end of the basketball. He's not the worst defender, and he can play make a little bit, but it's a security piece for Detroit, and I do like it for Detroit. Like I wouldn't be mad. Like I think it was a good deal as well. Um, you also have Brook Lopez going to the Clippers on a team friendly deal. I like this for the not Brooklyn. The Clippers. It provides a lot of value in terms of if you need to run those twin towers, if you need to run a different type of system where you need a stretch five because Harden or you're playing with Kawhi. You just need more floor spacing. That's perfect. Brook Lopez, he is very old. Like he's getting up there in age. He'll probably retire in a few more years, but they get another elite shot blocker and a guy who, if Zubac can't play, even though Zubac has had one of his best defensive seasons like ever, they have more spacing, and I like that. And granted, it is a 2 year deal, I'm pretty sure. So in just a few years, a lot of their players are on the books, right? So a lot of their players become free agents in I think 27. So that's great. So I like what the Clippers are doing in terms of just understanding their value in their players, what's left of them, because a lot of them are up there in age, and you have 2 more years, and you realize, okay, maybe these guys won't be here. Maybe these guys will give me the most in these next 2 years because we're all paying them a lot. But we can adjust, is what I'm saying. If you're the Clippers, you realize, okay, I can pivot, I can go to a different direction if these next 2 years is just not it. So it is a 2 year window, but I think it was a great contract for Brook Lopez, right? I really liked Nikhil Alexander Walker to the Hawks. Hawks. I think the Hawks are one of the biggest winners, if not the biggest winners. I think they're definitely the biggest winners in the East. They definitely jumped a tier. I think we're underrating how good of a player Porzingis can be. I understand the health is a real factor, but defensively, that stretch five type of player, him being an elite 3 point shooter, a shot creator on his own, it's very hard to find a player of that size, right, in that mold, right? And you get him. Not to mention, you should expect a leap from Zachary Richardson, who's played great. He didn't play great in the playoffs or the play-in, but he stepped up during the regular season. Jalen Johnson is coming back from injury. Onyeka Okongwu has proved that he can be a starting caliber player in this league, and he should probably start, right? And then you get Luke Kennard as well. You provide a bench for Trae Young. This is one of the best teams since that 2021 Eastern Conference team from the Atlanta Hawks, right? I think you provide a lot of bench scoring. Nikhil Alexander Walker is one of the best perimeter guards, defensive guards in the league. He can play that combo 1-2 guard, and then you have an elite 3 point shooter in Luke Kennard, and then you pair that up with Dyson Daniels. You get all these mesh of players who can seamlessly fit very well together in terms of both on the defensive side of the ball and being elite 3 point shooters. We saw what OKC did, having players that, they didn't have the best playmakers on their team, but they had a bunch of guys who can consistently catch the ball, shoot, and drive to the rim, get to the basket, and play elite defense on the other end. You had Lou Dort starting with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, and then off the bench you had Alex Caruso, you had Cason Wallace, right? Not to mention, I'm pretty sure I said Lou Dort. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But then you just have guys on guys on guys, and I like what they have out there. Granted, their backup center option, I think Porzingis plays better at the four, but because he doesn't really like to, rebound, right? But overall, I think the Hawks are one of the biggest winners, if not the biggest winners. They definitely jump a tier up with extra perimeter defense and better shooting. So I really love what the Hawks are doing. It's absolutely raining outside for me, so I apologize. It's like pouring. It's a thunderstorm. But Booker also, I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but Booker might sign one of the biggest contracts in NBA history. I know SGA just signed one for like $71 million a year, but they're discussing one for Booker for about 75. So it's crazy how the cap keeps getting bigger and bigger, And we see like in this new age of the NBA that like there very well could be like a role player getting $30 million per year in like 10, 15 years. Or maybe even closer than that, right? A role player who's played really, really good, but $30 million a year is absolutely insane, right? Now I wanted to talk about more of like the Bucks, understanding what the Bucks are trying to do. I'm kind of confused. I It's weird because you signed Miles Turner, right? But it's like the Bucks are probably going to be asked for like the next 2 years. Like Giannis didn't like the waving of Damian Lillard, and I didn't either. I mean, like one of the biggest things with Damian Lillard, what he said when he left Portland was that like when fans were telling him to leave, to leave, to leave, he was saying that like another franchise is not going to give you that loyalty. And in the span of like 2 months, he got blood clots, he got injured, and then he got waived. And this was one of his best seasons, if not his best season with the Milwaukee Bucks. So you have all of that. Now you have KPG as your starting point guard with Miles Turner. Yeah, you get Miles Turner, but you sign him for a huge contract, which I think even though he's not the best rebounder, he didn't play amazingly in the finals. I would say he deserved some type of contract like that, for 4 years. But you pair that up with Giannis and you replace the Brook Lopez signing and you get younger, right? But you don't have nobody to build us around. Half of your assets, a lot of what you're paying, almost 50% is to Kyle Kuzma, Damian Lillard, who's not even on the team, Miles Turner, and Giannis. That's absolutely insane haul. I've been saying for a while the Milwaukee Bucks should probably just rebuild. It's been almost 6 years since they've been, not six, 5, since they've been to the NBA Finals, and they just haven't capitalized on draft picks. I'm high on Tyler Smith. I was kind of high on AJ Johnson, him coming from Australia, but they traded AJ Johnson away. And he hasn't looked amazing for the Wizards, but you traded another young asset that you didn't want to develop. And I understand with these teams in the NBA that when you're trying to make a run, it's hard to rely on a young player. But we saw what these NBA Finals did. We saw what these two coaches did. This is like the first time in years where I felt like we saw guys that were like the 11th, 12th man get minutes, where their coach trusted them out there. Tony Bradley, Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd was playing. But you had guys like that out there. What? Ajahi Mitchell, Kendrick Williams. Like those guys in regular rotation is probably the 9th, 10th man. But usually in the playoffs, we've seen for years that those guys don't get minutes. But it's the trust. It's the system. It's when you have a trustful and definite system that it's reliable to use in the playoffs. You can use those players out there. And I feel like the Bucks need to develop their young core because, quite frankly, their drafting has been egregious. Granted, Jabari Parker and Malcolm Brogdon were good players, and you can't fault them for getting injured and then leaving. But they don't have a lot of reliable draft assets, and quite frankly, you waive Damian Lillard. He probably didn't have any trade market because of he's going to be out the entire season next year. But I think we're getting a real close deal to Giannis being traded. And honestly, one of my favorite destinations for Giannis would be the Atlanta Hawks. In terms of, well, actually, let me rephrase that. In terms of what I think could happen in terms of fit and like assets, because if Milwaukee was smart, they would probably trade a lot of those assets if they wanted Giannis, right? If they wanted to get rid of Giannis, worst case scenario, Giannis leaves, right? I think Atlanta has the best assets to give up for Giannis. But then again, Luka got traded for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a first-round pick, right? So anything could happen. But I think that's one of the better spots. If he were to get traded, there's other spots, but obviously Houston's out the realm because they just got KD. But Milwaukee's in an interesting spot. I really do think they, the beginning when Damian Lillard got traded, having Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez there, they had a chance, and then just injury riddles, and then just players getting a lot older. You got to get rid of Kyle Kuzma. He's just not good. You're paying him a decent amount of money. But Milwaukee's in an interesting situation. I don't really like where they're heading, but it's not the worst. You still have Giannis, right? You still have an entertaining player to watch. And that would still be probably like 5 first-round draft picks if you do decide to trade him. I just don't know where Milwaukee stands right here. And then honestly, to finally wrap it up, the Knicks, right? The Knicks, they get Clarkson and Yabusele from the 76ers. It's interesting because I don't think both players are like these elite talents, but you have a primary creator off the bench, and then you have a guy who can space the floor, who is a heart and hustle guy. Now, granted, the Knicks have a lot of that. You basically have you have a different mode of Josh Hart and Yabusele, right? But you get better bench pieces. You get more reliable bench pieces because you have Miles McBride out there, but then you had to resort to Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright, right? And you never want to have to resort to those players if they didn't get a lot of tick in the regular season. So I think they get two great pieces. They didn't go a tier up, but they improved their bench, which is one of their biggest things. And I do think the Tom Thibodeau firing was probably the right move. I think he can get you to the conference finals, but I'm not sure if he's that type of coach to really win you the finals, right? Overall, free agency. I'm just gonna check my phone to see if anything else happened, but I think this was a pretty calm free agency. Sham said like, "Oh, this was gonna be a big deal." Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like most of it was pretty good, fine. A lot of teams get better. I think Nuggets. You could argue Grizzlies. Definitely Atlanta. I'm missing a team. Houston definitely up there. Lakers signed Jake LaRavia. He's fine. He's not really Dorian Finney-Smith, but he's a backup option. You replace him just to see. Let's see anything going on in the NBA. Tim Hardaway Jr. has signed with the Denver Nuggets, I'm pretty sure. Unless I'm reading this completely wrong. Yes. Wow. A few minutes ago, Denver provides another three-point shooter, sniper, right? Well, known to be for a three-point shooter. He's getting up there in age, but Tim Hardaway Jr. provides more bench spacing, right? That's needed. And wow, I think Denver, they're getting a step up. Yeah, that's basically been about it. A few extensions here and there in the league, but overall, free agency was pretty good. I liked it. A lot of teams got better. And I'm excited to see, what summer league goes. I'm gonna be watching that. I'm gonna be analyzing certain players. I love to watch summer league. Granted, it's kind of boring because most of these guys, I understand, they're players that want contracts, so they're not gonna play team basketball or win the game. They're trying to be out there for themselves, which makes complete sense. But I'm gonna be watching that. I think this was a great free agency. More things could come. We definitely expect more trades to happen in the future. But yeah, my name's Cairo. Please subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.